This is a Roman wooden sword. For kids, a Roman toy sword from the Vindolanda site in northern England. Just south of Hadrian's wall, a very large wall that divided the British Isles, built in the beginning of the 2nd century AD by the Emperor Hadrian, who ordered the construction of the wall partially in order to defend against the northern peoples of the British Isles, who were not under Roman control, and partially as a statement of power towards these peoples. By building this massive wall, it was a statement of Roman power, saying, look, we are able to build this massive wall against you. We have the power and resources to build this. Consequently, we also have the power and resources to crush you if you try to oppose our will. Hence, it would be better for you to simply give in to our will instead of fighting us, fighting for a lost cause. But anyway, this large wall needed to be garrisoned and patrolled by Roman troops. And this is where the Vindolanda site comes into the picture. Vindolanda was during the 2nd and 3rd century AD a military base for the Roman garrison in the northern parts of the British Isles. The Roman garrison that would have guarded Hadrian's wall and guarded the northern frontier against invasions coming from the north. And this sword probably belonged to a Roman army kid, as the Roman state had begun to allow the soldiers to have families now. In earlier times, it had been forbidden for Roman soldiers to have their own families. But starting in the 2nd century AD and by the 3rd century AD, Roman soldiers were now allowed to have their own families, which they often brought along to various military encampments and bases, such as at this Vindolanda site. Anyway, back to the toy sword. The design of the Roman toy sword mimics the appearance of a real gladius, featuring a straight double-edged blade with a pointed tip, though a Roman toy sword would typically be smaller in size compared to a real gladius, designed to be suitable for kids to handle easier, and would be typically ranging from around 30 to 45 centimeters or 12 to 18 inches in length. In comparison, a real gladius would be around 60 to 85 centimeters or 24 to 33 inches. In addition, there was also the spata, a longer sword that was also beginning to replace the gladius at this time. And the spata was a little bit above half a meter to 1 meter in length, 20 inches to 40 inches in length. And the toy variants would be about 10 to 20 centimeters shorter than the real spata variants, which is about 4 to 8 inches shorter. Both spata and gladius as terms I use here for two different kinds of swords, but in Latin they are actually used interchangeably for swords generally. So I am kind of using a post facto historical construction here to describe these two sword types, which toys would try to mimic at various sizes depending upon the age of the kid and the choice of sword. This sword in particular was for a younger kid. For older kids, there were wooden blades that were of the exact dimensions of a real sword. Sometimes these pretend swords were actually training swords used by the Roman army that were used by kids instead. And these swords were actually heavier than the real Roman swords. They were heavier because the wooden blade was thicker than the steel blade of a real sword, and due to the fact that some of these training swords actually did have a core made of lead to make the weapon heavier, to make the weapon more useful for training. Because if you could use a heavier weapon during training, then you would have an easier time to use the real weapon that was lighter during a life and death scenario in combat. In any case, this was a play sword, not a real training sword. But Roman toy swords like these would offer children and young adults an opportunity to engage in imaginative play and emulate the martial prowess of the Roman legionary, while also serving as a tool of cultural importance and early cultural propaganda, reflecting the importance of military valor and military service in the Roman society. Toy swords is a way to get kids to imagine being in the Roman army, as kind of an early recruitment tool in a way, making the kids associate the army with fun, despite the reality of combat often being in many regards mostly not that fun and rather horrible. Because pre-modern warfare was just like modern warfare in that it was rather terrible at many times. I have even made a video about this. Link is in the description. And speaking about modern times, this use of toys, of weapons, is not that different from playing with toy guns today or playing video games when you think about it. They are all means to make play pretend combat scenarios, but without all of that seriousness of death and destruction and the risking of one's own life that is present in real combat. And they are a means to imitate what the adults are doing, but in a fun, playful manner. After all, you can imagine army kids today that want to follow their father's footsteps and just play with toy guns, or play various first-person shooter video games in order to imitate their fathers, just like this Roman kid that used this toy sword must have played with it in order to imitate his father. Or probably, like the parents of today, gave him this toy. Probably as an outlet for fun, but also as a way to introduce the military life into the life of the kid at an early age. Just like I could imagine that military men of today would do to their sons in a lot of cases, with their army kids. Or just kids generally that like to play with toys that imitate real weapons. Because it's fun, it's cool to play around with these toys. In certain regards, we are not that different today, even if there is more than 1,000 years difference between us and the Romans that played with these toy swords. And this toy sword demonstrates this similarity in just kids wanting to have fun with toys. Because sometimes history is rather simple, and it is simply about fun. And I hope you liked the fun in this video. Also, please post comments and questions in the comment section, and I will try to respond as quickly as possible.
Please do subscribe, as it would help the channel spread awareness about the humanities.
اشتركوا بالقناة من فضلكم.